All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. This morning we have Michelle Elmore speaking to us about marketing beef cattle. The next webinar, I just want everyone to note, is going to be on June 13th, and it's going to be Landon Marks talking to us about native warm season grasses. If you have any questions, Michelle's going to hang around for a little bit at the end to answer those. And with that, Michelle, you can get started.
All right, it's Michelle Elmore. I'm an extension animal scientist with the Alabama Cooperative Extension System, and I have the privilege of also serving as a state coordinator for the Alabama Beef Cattle Improvement Association. There's two primaries of beef cattle marketing, and we're going to discuss both of those today. First, feeder cattle marketing. And this represents primarily commercial cattle producers marketing feeder steers and also feeder heifers. Use this type of marketing with feeder cattle. Cattle producers are generally price takers, where the price per pound of live cattle is set by commodity trading. So a producer cannot set the sale price of their feeder cattle. However, understanding market standards or how feeder cattle are categorized within the industry, what the market targets or what it wants, and also discounts or what it does not want, and also the management factors affecting market price can help a cattle producer to increase the value of their feeder calves. So first we need to look at how feeder cattle are categorized within the industry. And these are the U.S. standards for grades of feeder cattle as defined by the USDA. In all livestock species, the feeder animal must be able to grow rapidly and efficiently, and at slaughter time produce a carcass with acceptable quality and high cutability. So therefore, desirable feeder livestock must have adequate frame and body capacity, acceptable structural correctness, and the potential to maintain a high lean to fat ratio up to market weight. They should have the ability to produce muscle without laying down excess fat. It is also of the utmost importance that the feeder animals of all species are thrifty, healthy, and free of any internal or external parasites. Now, cow-calf producers might not be as familiar with the term thriftiness. Now, this refers to the ability of a feeder animal to gain weight rapidly and efficiently. Now, moving into feeder grades, they're assigned in a two-part grade of frame size and also muscling score as established by the USDA. Now, the frame score is easily categorized simply into large, medium, or small. So frame size standards for thrifty feeder cattle are one of three marks: L for large, M for medium, and S for small. Large frame steers and heifers are expected to reach a U.S. choice carcass grade at a yield grade 3. This would be ½ an inch of back fat at the 12th rib and would finish at a weight higher than 1,250 pounds. So when looking specifically at large frame animals, we're talking about tall and long-bodied, ½ an inch back fat, with steers finishing weight at over 1,250 pounds, heifers finishing weight over 1,150 pounds. Medium frame animals are slightly tall, slightly long-bodied, again finishing at a ½ inch back fat, with steers finishing between 1,100 to 1,250 pounds at the end of the feeding phase, and then heifers finishing between 1,000 and 1,150 pounds. Small frame animals are obviously not as tall as medium. They're short-bodied, again finishing at the industry standard of a ½ inch back fat, with steers finishing less than 1,100 pounds, finishing less than 1,000 pounds. Now, this is an old picture, but it's very descriptive of the three frame scores that we're talking about. So the first one, of course, was small, and then medium, and then large. Now let's look into muscle thickness grade, which is the second part of feeder calf grades. Now these thickness or muscling grades range number 1 to number 4. And it's easier to visually evaluate mentally picturing these shapes over the hind end of a feeder calf. So number 1 is you can depict by the hind end is like a circle. This would represent, in human terms, similar to a bodybuilder, where there's lots of muscle width and more muscle definition. For a number 2, you can kind of picture a square over the hind end of the feeder calf. This will be represented in human terms by an average muscle person, a hard-working person who would work outdoors lifting things. So there's good adequate width to the muscles, but not quite as defined as it would be in a muscle grade number 1, which would be similar to a human bodybuilder. Looking at number 3, visualize a triangle, an upside down triangle in the hind end of the calf. This would be long and lean, like in a human marathon runner. So you have muscling, but more in length. A feeder muscling score number 4 would be very light muscled. It would also be descriptive of dairy type animals. So our muscling ranges range from number 1 to number 4. But also there's an additional classification for inferior cattle. These are cattle who are unthrifty and are not expected to perform normally in their present state. Now, these unthrifty category for inferior also includes those that are double muscle breeds, such as Belgian Blue or Piedmontese. Now, inferior cattle can have any combination of thickness and frame size, but because they're unthrifty or double muscle in their present state, they will have an additional classification as inferior. As we also look at muscle grades, these graphics just exhibit the differences of width between the legs evaluated across all muscle scores. So as you can see by the different shapes of the rectangle, but looking at the width between the hind legs, number 1 has much more width in that rectangle as the muscling holds the hind ends further apart. And that continues to narrow as you go into muscling grades number 2, number 3, and number 4 as the amount of muscling decreases from a 1 to a 4. So feeder calf grades consist of a combination of frame score and muscle grades. So you will see these as large number 1, large number 2, a medium number 1, and a medium number 2, and so forth. All right, let's switch to the management factors that affect market price of feeder cattle. This is understanding what the market wants, or its target, and what it does not want, or its discounts. And there are several management factors that can affect the market price of feeder cattle. First, castration of bull calves, which increases the value of the calf. Cow-calf producers and stocker operators benefit from castrating bulls because the market pays a premium for steers. Castration is a management practice that can pay for itself. Now, steers have higher meat quality as castration improves the color, texture, tenderness, and juiciness of the meat. Steers are also more docile or easier to handle than bulls. Next, the sex of the calf can also market price of feeder cattle. Heifers generally sell for a nickel to a dime less per pound than steers, as steers gain faster. The fill, which is not a common term known to a lot of commercial cattle producers, is the contents of the digestive tract. And shrink, which they might be more familiar with, or the potential loss of weight of feeder cattle, can also have an influence on market price. Feeder cattle with excessive fill are discounted because of a greater potential for shrink. So think about it as if you're the buyer. If you have an excessive fill in a particular feeder calf, you're going to have to purchase that calf at a heavier weight, and it has a greater potential for shrink So the investment you had for a heavier calf is going to rapidly change with the shrink, and so you've paid for excess weight that you have now lost. Now, following through on that mindset, also body condition affects feeder calf price. Over-conditioned feeder cattle will be discounted. Feeder cattle with extra body condition will lose more weight than feeder cattle with average body condition through the stress of transit and commingling in the next production phase. The buyers are unwilling to pay for this extra weight in fleshy or fat feeder cattle. Again, same mindset. They're going to have to purchase these over-conditioned cattle at a heavier weight and a heavier price, and then they also have a greater chance of losing this weight through the next stress of transit or commingling, and now they've lost some of that investment and they have to get that calf back to a better body condition, gaining more weight. Also, buyers prefer animals without horns. Horned cattle will be discounted due to potential bruising and extra processing to remove the horns. We talk a lot about bruising in our beef quality assurance training. Now, dehorning also reduces the possibility of this injuring and bruising. Cattle without horns, and this is something a cattle calf producer might not think about, require less space at feed trough or in transit. And this is very important to the buyers of feeder cattle as they consider how these cattle are going to fit in the rest of the production chain transitioning into the feed yard. Sickness or lameness will also be discounted in market price for feeder calves. Sick and lame feeder cattle have much higher risk of not recovering, being unproductive, and even can result in death loss for a buyer. So the risk is just too great for a buyer not to discount these cattle because they may not recover, slow down their weight gain, or can even result in the death of the feeder calf. Also looking at other management factors that affect the market price is uniformity. Uniform feeder cattle frequently receive a premium in market price. Uniform feeder cattle are similar in age, breed type, calf sex, and weight. Uniform feeder cattle are favored as cattle will gain predictably in the feedlot. So as cattle are sorted into groups or pens in the feed yard, if they're more uniform, it's more desirable because they will gain more predictably in the feedlot and finish at a more uniform time. So we have simplistic terms that represent this in the industry. These terms are even, uneven, and very uneven that are used to describe the weight range in feeder cattle in groups. So cattle are considered even when there's less than 100 pounds of variation in weight of calves and less than 150 pounds in variation in yearling cattle. Calves are considered uneven when there's 100 to 150 pounds of variation in weight in calves and 150 to 200 pounds in variation of weight in yearling cattle. Calves are considered very uneven when there's over 150 pounds in weight variation in calves and over 250 pounds of variation in yearling cattle. Now, uniformity begins with the cow herd and the herd sire on the farm or the ranch. So it begins at the origin of the feeder calf on the farm. Having a defined breeding and calving season is a very important step to produce uniform feeder cattle that will be similar in age and weight. Now, a 365 breeding and calving season will always have calves of various ages and weights, and that will increase having ununiform cattle. So consider planning a crossbreeding program, considering uniformity, and carefully consider the impact on your herd in purchasing a herd bull. Now let's talk about just for a minute the importance of doing your homework and also considering what you can afford in purchasing a herd bull. Now there's a rule of thumb in the industry that you can price for herd bull can be figured on the price that you receive for 5 steer calves. So to illustrate this, I have an example. Looking at the Alabama Weekly Livestock Market Report for last week. And this would be, of course, the week on May the 4th, 2018. Now, from that market report, feeder steer prices for large and medium number 1 and number 2 steer weighing in the weight range of 505 to 549 pounds with an average of 527 pounds had an average price of $158.24 per hundredweight. So this results in doing the math of an average price of $833.92 for each steer. Times that by 5 steer calves to apply this rule of thumb, and you have a bull price of $4,169.62. Now, that price is kind of rolling around in your mind, but you can also customize this for your own operation by looking at what you sold 5 feeder steer prices for from your at the time of the year that you commonly market your feeder calves. Easily look at that, do the simple math, and calculate that for your particular herd. Now, let's talk about the impact of a herd sire's genetics. And this is where it pays to do your homework because it has a tremendous impact. When you're selecting replacement heifers from your herd, you will increase the genetic impact of a particular herd sire. You think about that, the last 3 herd sires that you selected will significantly impact your upcoming calf crop. Now, what 3 bulls am I talking about? I'm talking about a cow sire, her maternal grandsire, and also the bull you bred her to. Now, over time, approximately 88% of the genetic makeup of a herd after 10 years will have come from herd bulls you selected. So consider your price range in selecting bulls and also do your homework to assess the value and quality of potential bulls that you would like to purchase. Now, let's consider marketing options for feeder cattle. First, local auction market. Now, it's an important item to note that auction markets are run by professionals who are licensed and bonded. Livestock auctions make their money by charging a commission. Marketing options of having a regular weekly sale is very convenient for cow-calf producers to choose their marketing time frame, but there are also special sales available at various local auction markets. So it pays to get to know your local auction market owner or manager and develop that relationship so that lots of cattle from your farm might be sold in time through your local auction market. Another option is marketing directly to order buyers. Order buyers are licensed cattle buyers that can come directly to your farm and purchase calves. However, it's important to remember they will want a uniform group of calves in order to fill the orders that they have. Also looking at an option of tele-auctions or board sales, as we call them here in Alabama. This is where cattle stay on farm until they're sold and ready for pickup by buyers. The calves will be preconditioned, which will include proper vaccinations and boosters, dehorning if needed, and being castrated. Now, sales such as this are most successful if they're sold in truckload lots and have at least 1,000 cattle offered in a particular sale. Feeder calves will need to weigh 500 pounds or more at pickup. With these sales, you should attract out-of-state buyers, particularly order buyers that will be looking for multiple types of cattle in quantity. But it does not mean that you have to be a large producer to participate. Groups of like-minded producers can pool cattle together, treat them similarly, have similar breed types, and can market these cooperatively. Looking also at retained ownership as an option for marketing feeder calves. Cattle will need to be 5 pounds more and be preconditioned. Now, our Alabama Pasture Rail program allows producers of various herd size to participate in retained ownership. You can consign as few as 3 calves or more. Now, the program requires that they need to weigh a minimum of 600 pounds at the shipping date, and there are a variety of shipping dates available in the program from year to year. Calves also must be weaned for 60 days prior to shipment for the various shipment dates, and must also be castrated, dehorned if needed, and properly vaccinating according to the program's requirements. Another option for marketing feeder cattle is freezer beef. Now, this is retaining feeder cattle, and they're marketed as freezer meat, either marketing by a live animal, a whole animal, half, or quarter, or even marketing individual pieces. Now, you need to make sure you do your homework, because the option can require either Alabama state meat inspection at processing plants or federal meat inspection if it's crossing state lines. So make sure to do your homework if you're looking and are entertaining and selling freezer beef. Now let's transition to breeding animal marketing. Now this is marketing for seed stock producers who are selling registered bulls and registered females, but also commercial producers in marketing commercial replacement heifers. Now, to introduce you to breeding animal marketing, marketing in the seed stock industry is complex. It's ever-changing and often a neglected aspect of business for seed stock breeders, because breeders see themselves as ranchers and cattle producers and not as sales and advertising representatives. However, the success of a seed stock operation depends nearly as much on the marketing program as it does the breeding program. So let's look at the value of a marketing program. And first, let's define what marketing even is. It's the process or technique of promoting, selling, and distributing a product or a service. And it will consist of advertising, and in the feeder and the breeding animal world, we're talking about print advertising, websites, social media, blogs, farm radio, and also direct mail. But it's also important for networking, being active in county, state, and national cattle associations and agricultural organizations. Also, customer service. Any service that you can provide to your customers for your size operation is good things to consider. But also reputation, the quality of you, the breeder, and of your cattle. It's obviously developed across time. So now let's transition to look at marketing positioning. Now, this is not a common term that a lot of seed stock producers think about, but it is very important to consider. Let's define it. It's the process to create an image or an identity in the minds of a target market audience for a product. So as a breeder, spend time thinking about these questions. What is my product, and who is my audience? This allows you to be focused and efficient, because your marketing message can then be conveyed more effectively. So let's talk about what my product. Identify the types of breeding animals your operation will market. Is it bulls for commercial and or registered breeders, registered females to other registered breeders, semen to commercial and or breeders, or commercial replacement females for fellow commercial producers? So who is my audience? Now, each type of breeding animal represents a different marketing position with a different target audience. And obviously, this may be a combination of different market types that we talked about. Your product will dictate this. So selecting your target product, such as bulls for commercial producers and registered females to other registered breeders, and the target audience for your operation. So you're going to have a target that might be different for bulls as it would be for registered females. But by targeting this, it allows you to be focused and efficient in delivering your marketing message, because then it can be conveyed more effectively to your specific target. So what are options in marketing breeding animals? Now, commonly this first is an auction, a public sale conducted by a licensed auctioneer to the highest bidder. And there are two common types. First would be a production sale. This is sponsored by a particular breeder or a select group of breeders and usually features one or two breeds. There's also consignment sales. This is usually sponsored by an association, whether it be Alabama or a state breed association, which is made up of multiple breeders and or breeds. Also, there's a private treaty marketing option, where a breeder will place a price on each animal or a group of animals to be offered and sold from the farm or ranch. And most seed stock producers use a combination of these auction types as well as with private treaty. So look at factors affecting breeding animal value. First, marketing, as we have discussed, advertising, networking, and building a reputation. But it also consists on demand. This price will be affected by the breed or breed composition of the animal and the supply in the area. The law of supply and demand definitely applies to breeding animal value. Also, the current market prices of that marketing season, which will be beef commodity prices that we've discussed in marketing feeder cattle. Also, the quality of the animal will affect the price. Conformation, structure, soundness, hooves, muscling, weight, and body condition score. EPD values, production weights and ratios, frame scores, scrotal circumference, carcass ultrasound measurements, disposition or the ease of handling, and etc. So let's look at each one of these affecting breeding bull value in a little bit more detail. Conformation, structure, soundness, and hooves, muscling, weight, and body condition score, birth date, and age. Now, soundness in both skeletal structure and hooves is very important. So pay attention to both and not neglecting one or the other. Now, thick weight bulls will be discounted. Older bulls are more marketable in the sense of thinking of the mindset of your commercial bull buyer, because older bulls have the ability to service more breeding females. Of course, EPD values. Now, balanced is best from adequate calving ease to above average weaning weight and yearling weight with average milk. But for breed heifers, more emphasis from a commercial producer is given to calving ease, and for breeding mature cows, more emphasis is given to growth, such as weaning weight and yearling weight. Also looking at production weights and ratios, frame score, and carcass ultrasound measurements. Don't forget to look at the ratios to see how a bull performed within his own contemporary group. And when discussing frame scores, basically extremes in either too short or too tall can reduce the number of interested buyers by them not wanting a bull that's too short, in their opinion, or too tall. Scrotal circumference and breeding soundness exam. Consider the age of the bull, but do not forget that larger scrotal circumference measurements are an indicator of his heifers reaching puberty earlier. And for breeding soundness exam, I highly recommend having one performed on all of your bulls before marketing. This is insurance for you, the breeder, to ensure that the animal is sound to produce calves. And it's also a customer service angle for attracting customers to purchase your bulls, as the breeding soundness exam has already been performed currently. Now, health testing information can be a factor in attracting customers as well. Testing for trichomoniasis and being test negative at the time of marketing attract more buyers. Also testing for BV/DV/PI, which is bovine viral diarrhea virus for persistent infection, may be an item that will attract more buyers and give them more confidence in purchasing animals from you. And of course, disposition or the ease of handling of the animal is also something that's a factor to potential buyers. Okay, let's switch to looking at replacement heifers. Now, overall, what do we want in a replacement heifer? We want a well-developed heifer that will calve unassisted at 2 years of age. We want them to calve in the early part of the calving season, wean a good, maybe even great calf, rebreed early or on time for the second calving season, and long term become a consistent cow that will maintain a good calving interval, producing calves that will perform. So let's look at quality factors affecting replacement heifer value: structure, conformation, and hooves, muscling, weight, and body condition score, birth date, and age. Again, soundness in both skeletal structure and hooves. Look at both. Thin, lightweight replacement heifers will be discounted because the weight will have to be put on these animals, and if the buyer does not desire that. Earlier born replacement heifers are more reproductively developed to breed more successfully. Production weights and ratios, frame scores, and disposition. Again, don't forget the ratios to see how a heifer performed within her contemporary group. Frame scores, again, avoiding extremes in either too short or too tall that can reduce the number of interested buyers. Disposition, ease of handling. Nobody won't deal with a problem animal. SIRE information, including EPD values if they're available, will definitely affect replacement heifer value. And for bred heifers, service SIRE information, including EPD values and projected calving dates. Calving ease values and service SIREs are very important to buyers. However, I would not neglect looking at weaning weight, as you're still going to be selling those calves by weight. Also looking at projected calving dates. Do they fit your customer's breeding season, or for you, the buyer, to have calves calving 2 weeks before mature cows, which is our target and what we recommend. Also looking if it's available, dam performance history of a replacement heifer. Looking at things such as calving interval of the dam, calving ease, progeny average adjusted 205-day weights and ratios, udder quality, overall a dam that has proven performance with a lack of problems. Now for registered heifers, also would play into effect of her pedigree and her own EPD values as well. Now there is a marketing expert that's been in the industry that's been a particular favorite of mine. It's Keith Evans, who is now retired, that served as a director of public relations and communication for the American Angus Association. And he published a copy of a variety of his columns in a book that says, "What is that bull really worth?" And he proposes there's 5 factors of buying decisions. 1, confidence. Does the product instill confidence to the buyer? Quality. Does the buyer believe you produce a high quality product? Service. Does the buyer expect to be treated well and know that you will be there for him or her? Selection. Does the buyer know that you can provide them with what they need? And then price. If all the previous 4 met, then the price comes into play. So as a seed stock producer developing a marketing program, do not neglect thinking about these 5 factors in the buying decisions of your customers. So think about each one of these from their perspective. But also remember, advertising and promotion is a cumulative process. Your reputation as a breeder and a marketer is built one small building block at a time. This also comes from Keith Evans, who was very experienced in marketing breeding animals and in the breeding animal marketing industry. Now, if there's any further discussion, as Courtney said, I'll be happy to stay on the line, or you can contact me directly and discuss more of the beef cattle marketing that we've discussed this morning. That is my office phone number, cell, as well as email. I'll be happy to discuss more specifics for your cattle operation. But I'd also like to include an upcoming program looking at cattle management, particularly in the area of preconditioning beef calves. This will look more on what we talked about in the various marketing options, looking at herd health for Dr. Rodney, Also, animal evaluation, looking at the feeder cattle grades that we discussed this morning. I'm looking at David Garcia, who is actually a federal supervisor for USDA AMS, and we'll be looking at those. And also the nutritional programs that are involved in preconditioning feeder calves. So this will be held on May 18th. It will be held at the E.V. Smith Research Center there in Shorter from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. So if you're interested in this meeting, please contact myself, Dr. Kim Mullinex, or Regional Extension Agent Josh Elmore to look at coming to this meeting and find out more information on preconditioning beef calves as an option for marketing your feeder cattle. Again, for further discussion, my contact information. Happy to entertain any of your questions, however, that you might have today, right now.
Okay, if there aren't any questions for Michelle, we will definitely be in contact with you all. If you have questions later, just email or give her a call. Again, the next webinar is going to be June 13th with Landon Marks talking to us about native warm season grasses. Thank you.